Hello. Today I'm looking at the third one of the wines I'm looking at from German wine producer Gerd Stepp in the Pfalz or Rhine-Pfalz. So the wine I have here is his 2023 Pinot Blanc. So Pinot Blanc, a grape variety that is also in Germany known as Weisserburgunder, white Burgundy. Weingut G Stepp, a Pfalz-based estate, a region where Riesling is to the fore, but somewhere where Gerd Stepp also makes quite a wide variety of wines from other grape varieties. Gerd is actually quite well known for making a really good Pinot Noir. We've already tasted a Scheurebe, we've tasted his Riesling von Saumagen, but as well as the Pinot Blanc, there's also Pinot Gris, Chardonnay, he has Silvaner, he has Gewürztraminer, and he even makes Sauvignon Blanc, and in fact I think there's a Cabernet Franc as well. Now, Gerd has taken over his family-owned vineyards, and these included some really quite good sites, notably the Dürkheimer Fuchsmantel, a portion of the Karlstader Saumagen, and the Wachenheimer Königs Vineyard. So this gives Gerd a number of vineyards to work with, all of which have differing soil types, ranging from red sandstone through highly calcareous soils to loess clay. And the small scale of these family holdings means he also works with 20 carefully selected local growers from around the area. Now, Gerd has had an interesting career. He grew up in Bad Durkheim, in the centre section of the Rhine-Pfalz, specifically in the Mittelhard. And he would help out in the family's vineyards and also their apple orchards, and eventually went off to study winemaking, to study oenology. And when he'd finished his studies, he decided to travel and first of all spent a year in New Zealand before returning to Germany, where he spent 2 years working in a place called Neustadt doing research into soil management. At the end of those studies, however, he headed off again. And there really can't be many people who've been involved in winemaking in more countries than Gerd. At one stage, he was a winemaker at Zimbabwe's largest wine estate. He went on from there to Nigeria to set up a bottling line for wine. He's worked in South Africa, in Stellenbosch, in Argentina, and also throughout Italy, from the north in Piedmont, Tuscany and Veneto, down to Sicily, right in the far south. But as well as heading abroad to make wine, Gerd also worked in the UK retail sector, starting off working for a retail chain called Oddbins, then moving on to work in the wine buying department at Marks and Spencer's, where he helped to develop their range, especially looking at the wines from Germany. After 9 years working for Marks and Spencer's, he returned to Bad Dürkheim to work at his family estate. He took full control of that business in 2019. That having been said, Gerd's consultancy business, Weinwerk, was something that he'd established back in 1994, and I believe he still does consultancy work for Marks and Spencer's and also makes wine that's included in their range. Gerd's approach is to manage his vineyards with a view to sustainability and natural fertility. He emphasises high quality practices, but also low intervention in the vineyard. But I'm not aware of his vineyards being certified as sustainable or organic or anything like that. Now, to look at the 2023 vintage for the Pfalz, this was a pretty good vintage. However, the growing season was fraught and contained quite a mixture of some extreme weather. Both the preceding winter and the spring were relatively mild, but there was high rainfall. There were also some destructive frosts. However, despite this, both budburst and flowering seemed to proceed largely without any problems. There were issues in early summer where there were some periods of extreme heat, but actually overall temperatures weren't particularly high compared to recent vintages. It was also bone dry, leading to some problems with younger vines that didn't have an established root system shutting down because they simply weren't going deep enough into the soil to be able to find reserves of water that they needed. Older vines with deeper root systems were much better able to cope. Although the heat did push the grapes on vines that hadn't shut down to reach full ripeness, producers had to be careful if they were irrigating, and they also had to manage canopies carefully to ensure ripeness was reached. Fortunately, the run-up to harvest brought some relieving rains. Although at the same time, this rainfall was relatively heavy and did actually increase the risk of rot and fungal disease. Once it had passed, however, there was a period of sunny days and an Indian summer really that enabled the grapes to complete their ripening in conditions The nights had become much cooler, which was better for the retention of acidity and aromas. As a result of this bout of heat, harvests were relatively early, with Pinot Blanc being one of the first grape varieties to be picked, probably just after Müller-Thurgau. Gerd refers to his winemaking style as being modern but minimalist. The wine is 100% Pinot Blanc from the Pfalz. My understanding is that at least the majority of it comes from Gerd's own family vineyards, those planted in Bad Dürkheim and in Wachenheim. And these are relatively steep, high altitude, terraced vineyards, which means that the fruit here has to be hand-picked. The soil types are a mixture of limestone and red sandstone. The hand harvesting enables a certain amount of selection to go on in the vineyard, and in the winery, the fruit is destemmed, crushed, pressed, and goes into stainless steel tanks for fermentation. And the wine is completely unoaked. It ages in stainless steel tanks for 6 months, and also it has its malolactic conversion blocked to ensure that the wine maintains as much crispness as possible. This isn't a wine intended for long aging. The notes I've seen suggest it should be drunk within 2 years. So let's have a look at the wine and see what we make of it, shall we? We have a medium yellow colour here. It's not particularly intense. The wine is labelled as having 13% alcohol, and it seems quite reluctant to be throwing tears onto the glass. This makes me think there's not a lot of extract going on there. It's just starting to form some tears now. So let's see what we make of the aromas, shall we? The aromas are a clean, pure, high-toned, citrus, lemon sort of note. There are perhaps some delicate floral touches. There are notes of lemon peel, and then behind that there's a creaminess. While the aromas aren't particularly pronounced, there's actually quite a nice intensity. So let's have a taste. There's a lovely lemony crispness, supported by some very good acidity. The wine's completely dry. Citric notes are supported by some clean mineral acidity that's really helping to make my mouth water. The wine is light to medium bodied. It's quite simple and straightforward. We don't have oak notes surrounding the fruit or anything like that. There's a creaminess coming from the lees aging on the back palate, and I suppose the 13% alcohol that's there is just helping to round out the texture on the finish, where again, lively acidity and flinty notes are meeting quite a vivid lemon and lemon rind fruit that's enduring really quite well. The wine is simple and straightforward, but it's got really good fruit definition and some quite nice intensity. I do really like its freshness, and it probably is a wine that needs to be drunk up relatively quickly. When I checked, there is no aggregated critic score on Wine Searcher for this wine. Personally, I think I'd give it a score of 89. I wonder if I'm being a little harsh to it, but it is quite a straightforward wine. Nonetheless, it's very well made and very easy to appreciate. It's another wine from Gerd Stepp that shows his approach to making clean, well-defined, fruit-forward wines that offer some great value for money. In terms of that, I will leave a link to the Wine Searcher webpage for this wine so you can see how much it costs and where it's available. That just leaves me to say thank you so much for joining me. I do hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you have, do please press the like button. I'd really be grateful to you for that. If you have any friends you think might like to watch, do please feel free to pass the video on to them. I'd really appreciate your endorsement in that way. And if you're watching these videos and you haven't actually yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, could I ask you to consider doing that? Increasing numbers of followers really will help me to develop the channel further. And if you have any questions or any comments, please do pop those in the comments box below. I would really like to know what you think about the wines I'm looking at, the tastings I'm doing, or anything else that relates to that. So thank you again for taking the time to join me, and I do hope that maybe you'll manage to make some time and come and join me for another tasting in the very near future. Till then, bye for now.